Hello and welcome back to the caves, everybody. Welcome back to Deep Rock Galactic, where today we're going to be taking a look at the Thunderhead Heavy Autocannon. This is Gunner's second primary weapon that you get access to, and we're going to be going over builds for it, as well as its new overclock, and builds for all of its overclocks. So first up, let's talk about the pros and the cons of the Thunderhead Heavy Autocannon. The major pro to this weapon is that it has really good AoE. It is very good against crowds, and it's very good at close and medium range. Major cons to this one are that it doesn't do very well at long range. It is not super accurate. Usually you can make it more accurate and actually make it quite reasonably accurate if you have Big Bertha and the accuracy in tier 2. But for the most part, this one specializes more in AoE damage and just spreading out damage across enemies. So I'm going to be using Karl.gg, fantastic website. I'd recommend that you check it out. It's really cool for making builds like this and you can see other people's builds. So in tier 1 for the Thunderhead, we have the options of increased damage. This is 3 more direct damage. The Thunderhead does both direct damage and AoE damage. So this one can be good because you can potentially stack them, which is nice. You have the increased capacity. This doubles your mag size, which is pretty cool. You already have 110 rounds in. Going up to 220 is pretty fun with the Thunderhead, especially if you want to take this for all rate of fire. And then we've also got expanded ammo bags, which gives you a whopping 220 more rounds. You already have 440, so going with this takes you up to 660 rounds, plus the first magazine you have in the gun, which is 110 rounds. Generally, I would go with the increased ammo here. It makes it so the Thunderhead really doesn't run out of ammo, and you don't really have to worry about it during really any mission. I rarely run out of ammo with the Thunderhead, especially when I take ammo for this. The other two are really good options though too. If you want to go with more damage, that's perfectly fine, especially if you want to take this on like a Dreadnought mission. I think it's maybe Gunner's weakest primary for Dreadnoughts, at least vanilla-wise, maybe not so much with overclocks, but it can still work really well in there. I'm not saying like this one's bad, it's just the other two are really good for killing dreads. Tier 2, we have the decrease in spread, so more accuracy. We have the improved gas system, which is a higher minimum rate of fire and a higher maximum rate of fire. The Thunderhead does build up rate of fire over time, so this can be pretty fun if you want to go with a high rate of fire build. Or we've got the lighter barrel assembly, which gives you more minimum rate of fire and scales that rate of fire faster. Usually I'll go with this one just because I'm not always shooting the Thunderhead a whole bunch, and there will be times where I just want to take my finger off the trigger, run somewhere, and then shoot again, and it does kind of help with that initial startup, where the Thunderhead starts out kind of slow, especially if things sneak up on you. In Tier 3, we have 3 really good options, where we have Supercharged Feed Mechanism. This is the exact same as the improved gas system in Tier 2, where this is a higher minimum rate of fire and a higher maximum rate of fire. We've got increased AoE damage, which is also quite good, and then we have increased direct damage, which is also good. Pick whichever one of these you'd like. If you want more AoE, go for that. If you want a higher rate of fire and you just want to have more sustained fire, you could go with this. Or I guess not necessarily more sustained fire, you'd actually have less sustained fire, but you'd have higher DPS. Or you go with high velocity rounds and just get more base damage. Usually I'll go with high velocity rounds, but again, all 3 of these are really good. Pick whichever one you'd like. This one's personal preference. In Tier 4, we've got armor breaking rounds, or we've got increased AoE. This one is also kind of difficult to pick between, because the Thunderhead is pretty good with either of these. Generally with the vanilla build, I'll go with armor breaking, but if you want to go with the bigger AoE, especially if you're going with like AoE in Tier 3, that does make sense, so you can just potentially splash this to more enemies, or you can just have a bigger splash zone in general. The armor breaking can just be really good for pulling off armor from like Praetorians or guards though, so that's why I usually take it here. Then in Tier 5 we have increased damage when you're at the max rate of fire. We have fear on every shot, or a 50% chance to fear on every shot, or we've got the shield at maximum rate of fire, so this gives you 50% damage reduction from all sources. This not only includes enemies, but this could also include gravity, so if you end up falling off of a zip line and you know it's a long way down, you could try firing your gun, assuming that you remember to do this, and you might actually survive that because you'll take 50% less fall damage as well, which can be pretty good. This also stacks with any sort of defensive buffs as well, so you could take this with like Veteran Depositor and stack them both so long as you're hanging out near the rig or next to Molly, which is actually pretty strong for this build. Generally, I'll go with Fear. Fear is really good because scaring away bugs, especially for an AoE weapon like this, is really nice. This isn't the strongest version of Fear that this weapon can have, because we will get to that in a little while, but this is still a pretty solid build, and it does scare away just about everything. It's really good for crowd control. It's decent for taking out big things, and it kind of struggles at longer ranges, so you're probably going to want to build your secondary to kind of complement that. For the secondaries, this is what I'd recommend for a revolver build. Revolver is really strong. It's got good long range, it's got high damage, it's very accurate. It complements the autocannon really well, since if enemies are out of range, or if enemies sneak up on you, you can pull this out quickly and just pick them off. You want to be going for headshots or weak spots in general, and this one is a very reliable secondary for that. For a burst pistol build, I'd recommend this one. This one focuses more on accuracy than what I usually do for the burst pistol. You could go with even more accuracy if you wanted to go with the recoil reduction in tier 2 for this, but this just makes it really easy to lock onto enemies at a long distance. Burst pistol also has a lot more ammo than something like the revolver, so you can use it for more general purpose rather than just picking off enemies at a distance, and it actually complements the autocannon quite well too. There's actually a lot of different ways you could build the burst pistol since it's fairly flexible, but this is usually what I go with when I'm taking it with the autocannon, at least with no overclocks. And then for the coil gun, I'd recommend this build. You could of course build it for more damage. I like having this as just an option to where I can quickly pull it out, snipe something off, put it back away, and then go back to the autocannon. It works really well in that role, and then I can have something like Born Ready to just reload, well, both the coil gun and the autocannon, because reloads are kind of slow on both of them, and you're going to need to reload the coil gun after every single shot. The autocannon does have the longest reload out of any of the weapons, so something like Born Ready is really good. You can technically reload cancel the autocannon. It doesn't save you a whole lot of time, because the actual reload animation of just pulling the magazine off and putting a new one on takes a long time, and you have to wait for the ammo to actually change there, but you can do it. Now with those out of the way, let's move over to the autocannon's overclocks. Our first overclock is called Splintering Shells. This is a very simple, clean overclock, like most of them tend to be. This is 1 more area damage and slightly bigger AoE. This is a pretty good upgrade to the autocannon since it just makes so your splash damage is that much better. The way I'm building it is like this, so I've built it slightly different. This is just more for AoE damage than anything, and it's really quite good. It's very good if you want to take this on Swarmageddon, because you can just hit close to them and you'll splash damage to everything. You got plenty of ammo, you got a fast rate of fire with the autocannon, and then once you run this out, then you can just swap to your secondary and let Born Ready reload it. The secondary I decided to take with this is Compact Mags, which is a very straightforward burst pistol overclock, but a really good one. This one gives you more ammo, but you have a slightly slower reload speed and slightly slower rate of fire. I've built it the same way that I did previously, and this one I find to be pretty good. This way I can just pick things off at a distance with this. I can use it as a general purpose weapon. Either way, I'll just switch back and forth when I'm about empty with these, and I should be reloading around the same time with Born Ready. If not, I want to be ideally reloading with the burst pistol, since that's going to take less time than the autocannon. Our second overclock for the autocannon is also very straightforward. This is Composite Drums. So this one just gets you more maximum ammo and a faster reload speed. The faster reload speed is kind of cool, but I rarely reload the autocannon. I usually let Born Ready take care of that since it has a long reload regardless, and the extra ammo on this one's really nice. I've built mine like this, so it's pretty much the same as our vanilla build, and really you can build it however you'd like. Any build works with this one. More ammo is generally quite good, and this is pretty fun to have a large magazine. It can be fun to take this with full rate of fire too, and then just lay waste to anything, and you have even more bullets than you usually do. So that's really nice. I do like taking a secondary that does high damage, at least high single target damage. And for this, I decided to take Elephant Rounds with the revolver. This one hits really hard and it's really good at picking off enemies at a distance. It can be great for picking off like acid and web spitters that don't want to get close. You could pick off really any threat at a distance, stingtails, leeches, Trijaws it's particularly good for killing. I have mine built like this. It's more damage, it's more direct damage, and that's really all I'm going for. I just want to use this as a pocket sniper to pick things off, then switch back to the autocannon to actually deal with crowds. Pretty straightforward build, but a pretty strong one too. Up next we've got Combat Mobility, which is a balanced overclock for the autocannon, and this one makes it so you have increased movement speed when firing the autocannon. It's still not up to the regular 100% that you move, it's 85%, but that is still faster than any of Gunner's other primary weapons, at least when you're shooting them, so that is nice. This also increases your minimum rate of fire, increases your rate of fire scaling, decreases your base spread so it's more accurate, but it does cut your magazine size in half, which is a bit rough. Going with the extra mag size in tier 1 is pretty good. You could go with increased ammo if you'd like, if you're okay with the 55 round magazine. I'm gonna go with the larger magazine here, go up to 110. It feels pretty nice. The increased rate of fire in tier 2 from the minimum is actually really good because in 2 shots you're up to your maximum rate of fire, which means you can either trigger either of your tier 5s that either give you 50% reduction in damage or give you that extra 10% damage. Both of them are really good. Usually I'll take the shield with this one because this one is quite strong to just move around quickly with, and if I am falling off of things I can just start shooting and then potentially take less fall damage. Build is pretty straightforward. This one's actually pretty flexible too. You can kind of build it however you'd like. It also pairs really well with any of the secondaries. So for me, I'm taking this with the triple tech chamber overclock for the coil gun. This one allows me to potentially fire 2 follow-up shots from the coil gun, and that is pretty fun. It's really good for picking off things at a distance. You don't have to fire out those 2 shots, and those 2 shots do consume extra ammo, as well as they're not as powerful as a regular shot from the coil gun, but it does give you a nice option, especially if you take the fear on this in tier 3, or the stun in tier 3. Both are actually really good with triple tech chamber. This one's pretty fun. It also gives me damage reduction, at least when I'm charging it. So here's another way for me to fall off of something and not die. This is like my go fast gunner build, and it's a very fun build. It's not gunner's strongest build, but it is a very fun one. I'd recommend you try it out. Next overclock is Carpet Bomber. This one is for more AoE damage, a bigger AoE, but less direct damage. Pretty much, you just want to build this for even more AoE damage so you can hit even more things harder. This is another one that's really good on Swarmageddon, and this one did get buffed, at least a while ago. So the way I'm building it is like this, where I'm going with extra ammo in tier 1, although the magazine size is really fun with this one if you want to take it to full rate of fire. It makes for a really good flat cannon build. It's not very strong as a build overall, and it's only good against crowds, but it is a very fun one to use. So on certain mission types, I'd recommend trying that one out. Or if you got friends that are taking like super ammo efficient builds and you just want to spray at everything, it's actually really fun then. But for this one, I'm going with extra ammo, faster top rate of fire with this one, more AoE, and just building this more for AoE overall. The fear is also pretty nice because if I am hitting big enemies, then they're more likely to turn around and I can shoot them in the back with my secondary, because my autocannon isn't going to be doing the most amount of damage to big things like dreadnoughts. For a secondary, you can take really whatever you'd like. It's pretty decent against most crowds. A high single target damage weapon would be really good. I didn't decide to take that though. I took magic bolts with the revolver because I really enjoy it, and this is for all AoE. This is just for clearing up things, so building magic bullets like this, it's a very strong overclock that's really good for crowd control. Do you need this much CC, this much crowd control, this much AoE overall? No, this is definitely overkill, but it is a very fun overkill for crowds, and so long as you got friends that can deal with big enemies like oppressors, praetorians, dreadnoughts, this is fine enough. You're just going to be the crowd control guy. Up next, we've got the unstable overclocks. And our very first one is Big Bertha. Big Bertha is your dreadnought killing overclock for the autocannon. This gets you the highest amount of single target damage out of any of your options, where this gives you more direct damage, less spread. It does cut down on your magazine size, cut down on your ammo, and cut down on your maximum rate of fire though, which can all be kind of rough with Big Bertha, but so long as you're okay with just using this to take out big things or just shoot things directly, it's actually quite good. So in tier 1, I'm going with extra ammo. This is pretty nice. Otherwise, if you go with the magazine size to offset it, it does go back up to 110, but then you're sitting at like 400 rounds. With this, you have about 600 rounds. So I just find that goes a little bit further with Big Bertha, and I like it a little bit more. Going with top rate of fire in tier 2, this is to offset the high rate of fire nerf that this one got, and it sets it about back to normal. It's slightly higher than the normal autocannon. You could go with even higher rate of fire in tier 3 if you'd like. I like going with direct damage and going up to 30. That feels really good for hitting most enemies quite hard. Armor breaking in tier 4 because we don't really need AoE damage, and then more damage when we're at the top rate of fire. Fear and the shield also work really well with this one though too, if you want to take that. This is really good for taking out crowds of enemies. It's pretty good at medium range. It's okay at close range, but it does kind of struggle there because you're not shooting as fast as the autocannon usually does. If you get to the top rate of fire, that shouldn't be that much of an issue for you. But if things just suddenly come up on you, then Big Bertha can feel a little bit sluggish for killing things at close range, and you might need a secondary for that. I would recommend that you take an AoE secondary, and for me, I'm taking Hellfire with the coil gun, which is a very strong secondary that can clear up crowds really easy. It's still quite strong for picking off targets at a distance too if you need that with the coil gun, although Big Bertha should be able to do that. Then we have the new overclock, which is Mortar Rounds for the autocannon. And this one's kind of interesting because this one basically makes the autocannon into a full auto PGL that Inji has. It's still kind of sluggish to shoot, but these rounds do a lot more area damage, have a bigger AoE radius. They do nerf your direct damage to nothing normally. They also make it so your magazine size and your total ammo is much less with the autocannon. This one, I found I like to build it like this the most. So in tier 1, I'm going with extra ammo. I think this is the best option in tier 1. The damage isn't necessary. The mag size isn't really all that necessary either, although that one can be fun with more rate of fire. In tier 2, I'm going with a higher starting rate of fire because the top rate of fire with this one is not super high. And a lot of the time, I'm just kind of tap firing this to kind of lob it as a grenade launcher. You can hold down the trigger and just keep firing it, but this one feels probably the most comfortable just to tap fire out of the autocannons. In tier 3, I'm going with more AoE damage. We don't do direct damage, so more AoE damage just kind of makes sense here, so we hit even harder. Then a bigger AoE radius in tier 4, although armor breaking can actually work pretty well with this one too. So take whichever one of those you would like. Armor breaking's pretty nice for beating up on Praetorians. The AoE damage makes it so you can hit a little bit more into crowds, and I know some people like taking armor breaking over AoE because the friendly fire from this one can be kind of bad. And then in tier 5 I usually go with the fear here just to scare things. Top rate of fire, I don't always hit the top rate of fire with this one compared to the other autocannons. It's not super difficult to do, so the other options are pretty good too, especially if you find yourself blowing yourself up. For a secondary, I decided to take the burst pistol again, and for this I'm running electro minelets. This one is also more for AoE, but at least I can use it at long range if I need to hit things. And you can take blow through rounds with this, that way the electro minelets pass through the enemies, stick underneath them, and then can zap enemies behind them, or zap the same enemy if they're sitting still. This is pretty nice, and I do have the stuns on this, so I can stun flying things. This build isn't the greatest towards like Macterra, assuming they want to keep their distance. If they get up close to you, then it's not that bad. But on other missions, it's really good for the crowd control, and it can be pretty good with all the slowdowns that this one has, as well as the fears. And then our very last overclock is the Neurotoxin Payload, which is still really strong for the autocannon. This one has a 50% chance of inflicting neurotoxin to enemies. This is poison damage that deals damage over time, as well as highlights them and slows them down. This also increases your AoE radius. This does nerf your AoE damage, and it also nerfs your maximum amount of ammo. These have been changed. This didn't always work like this. So you have more direct damage than you did previously with this overclock, which is really good. It's still decent at just killing things outright, especially big enemies, and it's especially good against crowds. So the way I have it built is like this: running extra ammo in tier 1 just makes it so you basically never run out of ammo with this one. Higher minimum rate of fire in tier 2, although all of them are good. More direct damage in tier 3, more AoE in tier 4, and then fear in tier 5. Fear plus the neurotoxin is really strong. This is probably one of Gunner's strongest builds in the game, because you can just scare away absolutely everything. Everything gets slowed down, everything gets poisoned, and everything takes damage over time. It also makes it really easy for allies to clean up, or just for your poison to tick down enemies and kill them. This is probably the best, or one of the best, crowd options that you have in the game. So much so that it actually even makes some of the modded difficulties pretty easy, and it pairs really well with just about any secondary. The only thing that this doesn't do really well is kill big targets, so I like taking a secondary that can do that. And for me personally, I love taking Mole with the coil gun and then just try to line up shots through the wall. I can use the autocannon to just spam fire at absolutely anything, even big things, because the poison can still apply to them and that still deals damage. Then if there's something big like a Praetorian, a Dreadnought, a Warden, a Repressor, whatever it might be, I can just tag it, try to get behind walls, and just fire right through those walls with the Mole and do really, really high damage. This is probably one of my favorite setups, although I know plenty of people love other setups like this with like lead spray or with elephant rounds. Elephant rounds used to be my go-to for this build. There's still a lot of really strong ways you can run this. And if you've never tried this sort of build before, especially if you're struggling on like Hazard 5 or Hazard 5 Plus, or you're struggling on the Elite Deep Dives, try out this, assuming that you have neurotoxin, and it probably won't be that much of an issue for you anymore. And that'll do it for the builds of the autocannon. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I hope it helped you out a little bit. Tell me your thoughts on the autocannon and its overclocks down below, especially Mortar Rounds. Seems like a lot of people really like it, myself included, but I don't think it's necessarily the strongest for the autocannon, mostly because neurotoxin exists. But still a pretty good overclock overall. Thank you guys. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye!